Hey, I'm Paeter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues Weekly, where I talk about DC Comics 1 week after their release on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite subscription service. In each installment, I pick an assortment of comics to talk about as a DC fan, and also explore what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, full spoilers for everything that I talk about. This is your first and only warning. Many spoilers lie ahead. Right now, we're going to take a look at comics released to the Ultra tier on September 26th, 2023. I went from thinking I was going to maybe have almost nothing to talk about to thinking, to like discovering, oh my gosh, there's a lot that I want to comment on here, even though it's really just 3 comics that I really have to comment on. The first is Night Terrors, Night's End #1, published on August 29th, 2023. As I predicted, based on how I'd felt about previous installments in this tie-in series, I was really uninterested in the story and the overall arc. It did bring some things to a close and possibly set up some new things that may or may not be interesting to me, but as a whole, this was really just kind of like something that did not catch my interest, and I don't think I'm going to find memorable at all as I look back on the Night Terrors crossover event. There was something, though, that really stood out to me thematically. Insomnia, the villain, hates the Justice League heroes and sees them as evil because of how they failed him, how they failed to protect and provide safety for his family. And that resulted in him experiencing misery instead. And I'm just wondering, why would this pass editorial as something with resonance, with dramatic resonance? What's the parallel? Whether editorial and the writer are aware of the parallel or not. I mean, you're always looking for something that's going to have dramatic resonance because in some way it connects to the human experience. Of course, it's going to be this grandly exaggerated, otherworldly thing when it comes to comics and sci-fi and stuff most of the time, but there still needs to be some kind of a parallel to our day-to-day human experience or fears or dreams or whatever in order for it to have dramatic resonance. And so that's what I'm looking at this situation and thinking, what's the parallel that would have led to editorial and the writer feeling like this is going to have a resonance with people? Insomnia says, you built a place where you can be celebrated. You're these lofty, great people that everyone admires, and yet you're not really that. You failed to provide safety. So what is the parallel? Do we revere or idolize law enforcement? Is that the parallel here? Or is it politicians? Well, I think both of those are doubtful. I think we really appreciate, at most, in the positive sense. I don't think we idolize law enforcement or the fire department services and those working there. I don't think we idolize them. We greatly respect them, but I don't think that's quite the parallel. Politicians, certainly not. I don't think I guess when you watch the political rallies, things can get pretty sadly like worship, but I still don't think that's the parallel here. Insomnia claims that the Justice League made the Hall of Justice as a place to be celebrated, a place to be worshipped, the church of false heroes. So these terms of worshipped and referring to the Hall of Justice as the church of false heroes, this is clearly religious language. Intended by the writer or not, I think Insomnia's rage most strongly parallels the anger commonly directed at God for personal suffering experienced by the individual that God is blamed for. And so I think that there's a question that comes in people's minds. Why would God be blamed, why should he not be blamed for failing to protect us from the evils committed by others or the suffering created by a broken world? And I think the counter question to that to consider is, does God's goodness obligate him to protect us from suffering in this life? Consciously or not, this issue is represented all over in fiction. And so we need to choose to consciously grapple with it, because if we don't, our subconscious and passive minds are going to end up developing thoughts and feelings that are powerful because they've been kind of subtly unchallenged in the back of our minds and just kind of developed and gained footing and a home in our minds without being examined and challenged. And suddenly they become kind of like these foundational thoughts to us. Powerful in that sense, but not based in reason or truth, because we've never intentionally put them on the table to examine them with reason and truth as our filter. So some great resources and thinking on the subject of God and our experience of evil and suffering can be found, I think, by using the key search words evil, suffering. Just put both of those, evil, suffering, in the search field at reasonablefaith.org. And I'll just tease a little bit of what you'll find there by asking, what is the purpose of life in this broken world? Are we merely God's pets that he is obligated to keep comfortable? Or is there something bigger and eternal going on that would justify permitting finite experiences of pain and suffering in light of this larger eternal, infinite purpose? Again, reasonablefaith.org, so much to explore on that topic. Stories like this just kind of touch on it, but they don't really properly explore it. That's up to you and I to really be intentional about exploring responsibly. Well, eventually Insomnia is defeated and relegated to some kind of hellish personal nightmare of being devoured by his family that he tragically lost. And I'm like, are we supposed to feel good about this? Like, yeah, he's getting what he deserves. I don't know, this is pretty weird and dark. Wesley Dodds, the original Sandman, also is returned and reburied in his grave. And he, comments that Diane, his wife, is waiting for him. And so evidently this is not the return for Wesley Dodds. I was kind of hoping that it might be. So I'm wondering, what was the point here then? Just to kind of as a throwback to test the waters to see if there would be interest in a permanent return of Wesley Dodds. I don't know. I'm left feeling a little bit unsatisfied by his use in this story. The other really thematically interesting moment to me in this issue was when Deadman seemingly dies, quote unquote. I don't know how Deadman dies. Really, I think it's the idea is moving on to heaven or paradise or nirvana or whatever, And as he is moving into the light, he says, "It's time I went on a new adventure. No more watching the living. I need to be the star again. Don't you hear it? They're cheering for me." And on one level, I connect with this vision of quote-unquote heaven. Boston is a performer who wants to be appreciated and valued, as I think most performers do. As an actor, singer, creative type myself, that absolutely is a page out of my diary, but not one I'm especially proud of. Validation from people is ultimately empty. It also does not satisfy in any lasting way, and it certainly wouldn't satisfy for eternity. But Boston's hunger for cheering and applause, I think, speaks to the universal desire to be loved, to be cherished, to be treasured. And only God can provide that in a way that will last forever, because he is faithful and absolutely consistent in his character, so he will never fail to love, cherish, and treasure his children. And also, God is God, and so his opinion, his estimation of things has infinitely more weight than someone else that just says, "Hey, good job, you," because at the end of the day, we're all finite people at best and broken, messed up people with the wrong view of things, at worst. And so how much should our praise be really given weight to begin with? So really, God is the only one that can provide what I think Boston is longing for here. I'm good with this being the end of Deadman. I'm up for a new Deadman, maybe a new character with a fresh take, or if they want to just have this be a transition point where Boston Brand continues as Deadman, but kind of gets a new mission from someone other than Ramakrishna. I mean, he even says himself that this being, which I think is kind of a made-up East Indian sounding, Eastern religion sounding kind of name. It's not an actual, from what I understand, deity from any Eastern religions. But he even says in this issue that, he says, my deal with Ramakrishna was over lifetimes ago. So I don't know if this will be a reset where he's going to get a new mission, a new purpose, a new power set, hopefully a new costume. I've never been a fan of Deadman's costume. But yeah, either way, whether it's Boston Brand or somebody else, I'm ready for this character to be given a rest or a reset, and if they do continue to have a Deadman in the DC Universe, to have a fresh take. I'm ready for something else. Next then, we have Batman, Catwoman, The Gotham War, Battle Lines, #1. That title is crazy. Batman, Catwoman, The Gotham War, Battle Lines. That's like three arguably four maybe different titles to this one issue. August 29th, 2023 is its publishing date. And I almost skipped this one because I was just like, I don't know. I did not like what the style of writing in the recent Catwoman series. And so I was like, I don't know if I'm going to like this. But for whatever reason, I was like, well, let's just look at the first few pages. And I totally got sucked in. I think that I didn't understand that it was the setup to this larger event that's going on called the Gotham War. And as of this introduction to it, I'm very interested in what's going to happen with that event. Basically, the status quo between Selina Kyle and Bruce Wayne is that the engagement is long over. She left him waiting at the altar, or was it he that left her waiting at the altar? I think it was, I can't remember. Anyway, it didn't work out. But they really had a relationship that was going as strong as two woefully dysfunctional people's relationship could be. But it didn't work out. So there's complex feelings that remain between these two characters. Catwoman is now returning to a life of crime, but she is an anti-hero, or like a kind of a white hat villain. She really wants Gotham to be in a better place than it is, and she believes that her agenda right now is the best thing for Gotham. And so she's recruiting all these criminals, and it really focuses in on one in particular that we kind of get to know a little bit in this issue, and just kind of his plight, his difficulty in life. He's having lost his wife, being a single parent and trying to take care of his daughter, and just making some bad choices to do that, hiring himself out as a goon. But then he has a bad experience. He also doesn't get paid what he was told he would get paid. And so he's just left like, what in the world am I doing with my life? And it's there that Catwoman recruits him and says, hey, come work for me and you'll get what you actually are owed. And so she is committing to training all these goons that have made the rounds working for all these different villains in Gotham, training them to pull off heists. And she calls a meeting with the Bat family. So Batman, Robin, Nightwing, all the associated cast, and asks her trained goons who are going out and committing heists and robberies to be left alone because she thinks that she's helping Gotham. And the arguments that she presents for that are, one, there are no goons left, or not enough anyway, to work for other criminals. And so the other criminals that are committing violent crimes and crazy outlandish stuff that's destroying all kinds of property and stuff, they don't have the manpower to help them. And her second argument is that her goons, her trained goons, only rob the rich. Her third point is that these aren't violent crimes. They are required to only rob the rich and to commit no violence in their crimes. To get out of there if it looks like it's going to get violent, no violence. And then fourthly, she requires all of them to give 15% to charity. And so these are the four arguments that she gives for why Batman and his Bat family should leave her goons alone and just let them steal. And violent crime is way down. Inarguably, it's way down. Selina reasons that again, these goons were underpaid and abused by other criminals. They turned to crime because they had no skills for doing something better, she says, for legitimate work. They weren't skilled for that. And so she genuinely believes she is helping them and Gotham. So there's some great moral complexity here. I was just reminded with all three of the comics I'm talking about this week about how comic books are always so much more, I think, than any other medium, playing with these moral, philosophical, spiritual themes. They're so rich and at the surface so often in comic books compared to other story and entertainment forms. Certainly there's a political theme as well, and I would say that, sometimes there's a blurry line between is this a political theme or a moral theme or a philosophical theme. You've got this idea of redistribution of wealth where the criminals are kind of treated as the misunderstood, the downtrodden that are not able to catch a break, and the wealthy, they don't need their wealth, and so we should take their wealth and give it to people that are having a rough time. And so the criminals are strongly humanized here, and it does make Batman's war on crime more complex, because it makes us think about, okay, well, who is he bloodying his hands? Who are all of these heroes bloodying their hands, punching out? What's the story with these quote-unquote goons, So I'm wondering if this story is going to lean to a fault into sympathy for criminals. to the point of not holding them responsible for their criminal choices. I have reason to think it's not going to go full on in that direction, but I think that's a danger when you're telling this kind of story. I'm also wondering if Bruce's charitable work and his funding of that work is going to be brought up. So many times throughout comics, usually in passing, there's mention of Bruce Wayne funding all of these things that are meant to help people who are in these rough these rough seasons of life or situations in life, to get the help they need to re-enter into society lawfully, and probably with, I don't know that I remember specifically a program that Bruce has funded that helps people gain marketable skills, but I mean, he's done so much as Bruce Wayne with his funding to help the city. I wonder if that's going to come up at all. What he's criticized for is by putting all of his money into bat gadgets and punching people out and stuff like that. But so far, Bruce Wayne's charitable work has not been brought up at all, and so I think that's like a big gaping hole that needs to be brought up, needs to be filled at some point in this story. I hope that they do. So it at least doesn't seem at this point to be overly simplistic, since violence still results from a heist. Now, it's unexpected violence because the person whose home is being invaded shoots the criminal and he ends up dying. And the criminal didn't think that they were going to be home. They were told they were going to be gone, but a family member was still at home and shot the criminal. So again, it positions the criminal as, oh, this is tragic because this criminal died. Something bad happened to the criminal. So again, so far they are leaning in the direction of painting these quote-unquote goons as sympathetic characters, and I don't mind that, because there are, in the real world, the true black hat villain is so rare. People are people and they're complex. That doesn't mean that they are not deserving of punishment. It absolutely does not mean that. But it does mean that it's not so simple as we give this punishment, that we are not also required, specifically as Christians, to have compassion and consider, gosh, this is a tragedy that they got to this point. How can I help them if they can be rehabilitated? How can I help others not fall into this kind of sin? So anyway, yeah, characters are at odds with each other because different members of the Bat family see this whole situation a little bit differently. So they're at odds. There's moral complexity. I am totally on board as of this point with the Gotham War story. So again, that's Batman Catwoman, the Gotham War Battle Lines #1. Finally, and I'll try to be brief here, Action Comics presents Doomsday Special 2023 #1. I disliked this story, but I appreciate that it accomplishes setting up a return for Doomsday, and a return for Doomsday as a real threat, because characters are talking about like having nightmares about Doomsday, and Supergirl talks to Clark about his experience dying fighting Doomsday, and so I think there were a number of kind of rematches and returns of Doomsday in the past where he was too easily defeated. And Doomsday's job is to show up and to kill and destroy and to be unstoppable. And the more you stop him successfully, the less he is Doomsday, the less he functions the way a concept like this character is meant to function. And so I hope that they do have a return here, that he is absolutely feared, and that he absolutely does do something horrible that really makes a big mark on the DC universe. I think that's the only time Doomsday should be brought out, is when he's going to do something that is going to majorly change something in the DC universe. And a change that sticks for a good long while. So anyway, I'm glad that it set that up. But the story itself I didn't like. It presents Doomsday in hell, suggesting that he, I guess, has a soul or something. I'd never thought about that before. I'm not sure how I feel about it. Now, he was, in the origin story for Doomsday, a baby originally, but then was cloned numerous times. So I guess that brings into the question of, okay, would theoretical cloning of a person result in another person, or would it result in a soulless thing, or whatever? I think that it probably would result in a person that has a soul, but anyway, there's just a little bit of room for doubt there, and then also just the nature of Doomsday and how he's been portrayed typically as this unthinking, unreasoning, bestial force of nature, there was no reason to really contemplate, oh, I wonder if he has thoughts, I wonder if he has a soul, or, whatever. And then if he has a soul, can he potentially be reasoned with? Or can he be potentially redeemed? And I really don't like the idea that either of those questions could be answered with yes. I prefer him as this bestial force of nature that his function is just to be feared. And to wreak havoc and destruction, as I said before. The issue also borrows significant biblical language several times, while also radically changing the definitions of the terms that it's using. Hell, for starters, I know is not exclusive to Christianity, but I think the artwork of like the chains and the flames and stuff, while not a lot of that, not biblical, comes from Christian tradition of art. That's based on, in some way, intending to represent Scripture, even though a lot of our visual representations, even in classic art, are not representative of the biblical data. So anyway, but hell is a major focus here, and it's created basically by people's belief in it. The very existence of hell is said to be created or continues because people believe in it, which is not the biblical idea of hell. Hell has been prepared for Satan and the angels that fell with him as eternal punishment and eternal quarantine. That's what hell was made for. What's said later on is that people will end up there, but hell is primarily made for Satan and his angels. And it's meant to be, so it was made by God, it's sustained by God, and it will be sustained forever by God, not by anybody's belief in it. And then also there's this idea that in hell, if the dwellers, denizens, no, that's, I don't know what word I was looking for there, but if those in hell collectively believe in something, it makes it a reality. Specifically, something that they fear, so like them fearing Doomsday and fearing him as kind of like a rule and ultimate authority, it has made him sort of the king, or is making him sort of the king of hell. So that's kind of a weird idea as well. Certainly nothing in Scripture that would indicate that the nature of hell and what it is in any way able to be manipulated by the collective fears or thoughts of those who are there. The devil, not called the devil by name, and DC does this a lot. They'll bring in a demon and they'll really kind of hint or imply that he is the biblical concept of Satan, but they never call him that, and at the end of the day it ends up being, well, no, it's not Satan, it's somebody else. And so in this, the devil, quote unquote, is the first of the fallen, which of course is evocative of Lucifer as the first of the fallen angels who rules hell. I didn't like his costume, felt like it was pretty ho-hum. But anyway, yeah, so we've got him in here. I don't know, I guess I won't pick, other than his costume, I guess I won't pick too much at, like, the unbiblical nature of the devil here. I mean, he certainly says some things that are false, but I could, in my headcanon, say, well, the devil's the ultimate deceiver, so of course he's going to feed a load of crap to the heroes that are witnessing this stuff. There's this idea of people in hell being tortured by demons. This is a very common idea, and it couldn't be further from the truth. Again, hell is created for Satan and demons and fallen angels, and it is for them to experience torment and wrath and punishment and quarantine. They are not ruling over anybody. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, Son of Man. Was it used both in the main story and the backup story? At least in the backup story. I think in the main story too. But Son of Man is used as just another name for human. And this is a big misunderstanding of the phrase Son of Man as used in Scripture. That's really where it comes from. It's used a lot in the New Testament. It was Jesus' favorite term for himself, and he was referring to himself. He would say the Son of Man, talking about himself in the third person, came to do this, and the Son of Man, this and that. And there's a number of people, secular well, I don't know if it's actually, I don't think there's any academics that are actually their specialty is New Testament scholarship that would say this. But I think casual non-Christians, maybe some casual Christians who are casually reading the New Testament, just kind of assume that it means, that he's a human. It's emphasizing Jesus' humanity. When in fact, it is pointing to a passage in Daniel that talks about a very specific figure prophesied called the Son of Man, who was going to have all these things that were true of him that made him basically a unique representative of God himself. And so, although a lot of people are comfortable referring to Jesus as the Son of Man, thinking that's downplaying his divinity, it's actually the opposite. Every time Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man, he is saying something radical and outlandish and that got him into trouble with the Jewish believers at that time, who knew what the Son of Man, what that title referred to. And then just other implied logical inconsistencies throughout. It really just felt like this conceptual free-for-all where no ideas needed to be justified or needed to be consistent with anything in particular, including its own internal logic. And so that made it a difficult read on that level. It's really a reminder to me that as we think about the ideas of heaven and hell, it's important that we make an effort to develop those ideas based on Scripture itself, rather than entertainment or even Christian tradition or Christian art or reports of subjective near-death experiences. Otherwise, what happens is we risk developing views of hell that create an untrue and unjust picture of God's character because we're misunderstanding the nature of hell and just incorporating and assuming ideas that are actually just tradition. So we can get this untrue, unjust picture of God's character. We can also get views of heaven that make it a place that we don't truly look forward to and long for. So anyway, yeah, Doomsday Special number 1, certainly a springboard for some thought about some worthwhile things, but definitely not an issue that I enjoyed. I'm just hopeful that the story that continues from here in the pages of Action Comics, as it kind of teases, will lead to some really cool stuff with Doomsday and his return. And those are all of my thoughts on comic books for now. As always, I'd love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Remember to check out christiangeekcentral.com for tons more content. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. It is time again for Christian Geek Central's annual Game Save event, fundraising for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, which provides free treatment for children facing life or death circumstances and shares its cutting-edge, life-saving research with hospitals all over the world. And once again this year, I'm drawing attention to our team's fundraising by performing a 24-hour marathon of video gaming that I will live stream on youtube.com/ChristianGeekCentral beginning 6 a.m. Pacific Time on Saturday, November 4th. You can donate or get more info by clicking on my fundraising page in the links below, where you'll also find incentives and rewards for doing so. On top of that, I've set fundraising milestones that will unlock strange and unusual happenings as I reach them. Finally, if I reach my $500 goal by the end of Thursday, October 19th, I will do a 4-hour Get Good live stream before the end of the year, playing only the most frustrating, difficult games in my collection. Now, there are some stipulations and time limits on those rewards and milestones, so quickly follow the link below to my fundraising page for all the details. Believe it or not, this makes the 10th consecutive year of Christian Geek Central raising funds for kids in great need of medical care. I hope you'll be a part of helping me and the Christian Geek Central Game Save team do some good for some kids who really need it. And then please join me at youtube.com/ChristianGeekCentral for my 24-hour marathon starting at 6 a.m. Pacific on Saturday, November 4th. Hope to see you there.